Okay, everyone, I am now going to get started. Just know that the webinar should last about an hour, about 60 minutes. I'll try and be as to the point and efficient with what I have to say as possible. Just know if you want, you can click the upper right-hand part of your screen where you see the presentation if you want to maximize your screen. That's up to you. And also, hopefully the sound is really good here for you. I know we've tested it before this, and I think it's pretty sharp. But if you wanted to, I know if you put in any headphones, I know that's probably best for sound as well. And lastly, just know that we're going to be opening this up for questions at the end. So we're going to make sure that we leave a good 10 or 15 minutes for any questions. We'll open up the chat box at the end, and I'll be answering any questions that you have regarding the presentation. Okay? So with that, I'm going to get started. Again, I thought it was timely, given the time of year, to really put together a webinar that talks about building up your playbook, digital marketing-wise, for the upcoming year. So before I dive into tactics, I just thought I'd first start with just one slide of some stats that probably many of you are not surprised by, that digital marketing is just exploding. It's continuing to explode. So some really eye-popping stats here. Even if we just look at that number 73 in the middle, right? Google ad revenue alone was $73 billion in 2017, which is remarkable. Digital ad spend is expected to grow per annum at about 11% between 2016 and 2021. And U.S. mobile digital ad revenue is expected to be $71 billion in 2021. So I'm sure these aren't surprising numbers, but they are still eye-popping that digital is really the growth engine here for marketing. It was over the last couple of years, even for TribalVision and for our own clients, and that's only going to continue. So with that backdrop, just know that the way that I want to structure today's webinar is, there's many different frameworks that we could be using to talk about your marketing efforts for the upcoming year. The framework that we really like using a lot of the time with our own client base is thinking of this funnel, right? So we're going to be talking about digital marketing when it comes to top of funnel, meaning pure lead acquisition, and then mid funnel, which we call nurture, which is once you actually have someone who's raised their hand, what marketing campaigns and initiatives should you be pursuing and implementing, and then what should you do at the bottom of your funnel so that you can convert business to an actual sale. So we're going to be going from lead to close in this type of presentation. And just know that even if we look at this first slide, in the top of funnel of this first slide, there are hundreds really of channels and techniques that we could be using to try and drive acquisition. So I just want to be clear about that. Just know that we're only going to be focusing just on our top 3 for today's webinar, which is search engine optimization, LinkedIn marketing, and account-based marketing. And just know that, I'm sure you've all heard of probably at least 2 of the 3. Maybe some of you haven't really heard of account-based marketing before, which we'll get into. But I really want to make sure that this is practical. So my goal here for these 60 minutes is for this to be as actionable and practical for you as possible to bring back with you. So I'm not just going to explain search engine optimization, everyone's heard it. I want to really be digging into specifics as to what tools and tactics you should be employing for this year for search engine optimization. And same thing for LinkedIn and also account-based marketing. So with this framework in mind, I'm going to just, excuse me, getting over a cold, I'm going to jump right in to top of funnel. So again, very quick primer slide here on what search engine optimization is. It's allowing your organization to appear on the first page of Google without having to pay for that privilege. Again, if you see the screen where you see the little yellow boxes, that's paid search. You have to pay to play to be in the top 3 slots on the first page of Google. Instead, we're going to be focusing in on what's called organic search, which is how can you be ranked as highly as possible on that first page without having to place yourself in that auction-based bidding system that's made Google its billions. Okay, so that being said, just know that there's many techniques that we're currently employing that really are having some impact. First, though, before we even talk about techniques, A mistake that I find a lot of organizations making is they just say, okay, well, I'm just going to hire an SEO firm and they can figure out SEO. And everyone loves to say the word SEO, but they don't sometimes like to dig in and really figure out really what keywords they first should even be ranking for. So here's a quick little nugget for everyone. I'm going to try and throw a lot of nuggets out there. There's a website called SEMrush. So if you go to semrush.com, there's a lot of information there for you to start analyzing really where your traffic is coming from above and beyond basic Google Analytics. Okay, so I'm just using TribalVision, my company, as just the big example here, but you can see really what keywords are driving some traffic for TribalVision, right? Whether it's our name, of course, outsourced marketing, which we've really tried to own in this space throughout the country. As you can see, our top words are outsourced marketing. But in addition to that, SEMrush also allows you to really take a look at and study the backlinks, meaning the links that are coming into your website. So as you can see here, in the bottom right hand of the slide, we have 464 total backlinks coming into TribalVision, and I can then dig in and really see where each of those backlinks are coming from. Okay, so there's a lot of information just to get started with the SEO that you can be digging into before you even decide what keywords you want to start trying to organically rank for, meaning rank without having to pay on Google's first page. Okay, also what SEMrush allows you to do, it also allows you to really know and have due diligence and an insight into what your competition is doing. And that's where I find the most value from SEMrush, is it'll allow you to even show you what their spend is on display advertising. It'll allow you to know what keywords they're ranking very highly for, the number of backlinks that are coming into their own websites. And by the way, right, another nugget, what you should be doing is taking a hard look at those backlinks and figuring out how you can get many of those same backlinks to your own website. Since if your competitors are having links come from other websites, maybe it's industry publications or associations that they've joined, you should certainly be studying that and doing something with that and trying to start build your own backlinks on your site. Okay, so SEMrush, a bit of a no-brainer when it comes to figuring out what keywords you should be ranking for. Okay, and from there, you should also then start digging in on your own website and figuring out, okay, now that you've selected, let's say, your 10 or 15 keywords that you want to be ranked for organically, you need to now optimize that on your website. And so it's called on-page optimization. So SEO is broken into on-page optimization and what's called off-page optimization. On-page is just what it sounds like. It's on each of your pages of your website. Is it built properly, right? And are the keywords embedded properly into whether it's your URL or your title tags or meta descriptions or meta keywords where Google's search algorithm will find you relevant for those words. And most of the time for mid-market companies that we work with, and even sometimes larger publicly traded companies we work with, we see that a lot of companies are falling down on this, just the basic block and tackling. So again, a nugget here, if you haven't really thought about looking at each page of your site to see if your keywords are appearing on those pages, you should certainly be digging in, and that's really the lowest hanging fruit you have. So number one, of course, is your URL, your domain name. Again, you want to make sure that, if possible, .com URLs are valued more than .net or .org. Of course, that's a no-brainer, but a lot of companies are still on a .net when they really should be on a .com if possible. But more importantly, for search engine optimization, you've got to make sure that your keywords are appearing in your title tags, and a title tag is what's found right above your browser on every page. So you should make sure that you have a strategy for each of the pages of your website housing 2 to 3 keywords in that title tag. That, from a hierarchical perspective from Google, that is the most relevant weight that's provided from Google. So oftentimes we find that even if you go to your home page, your title tag sometimes just says homepage, because again, you might have had a design firm design your website and they're not thinking at all about search engine optimization. So it's a huge opportunity that's been lost and optimizing your site to be found by the keywords that you've selected. So number one, and I'll tell you a tool in a second to see that with your title tags, but number one is you've got to optimize your title tags. As you can see, it should contain keywords and be no longer than 70 characters in length. In the past, companies have employed SEO firms where they've used black hat techniques where they've just tried to stuff what's called keyword stuffing into title tags and into your content on your page, where it looks really relevant because you say it 5 or 6 or 7 times, but you know, Google is smart enough now, their algorithms, to sniff out that black hat stuffing technique. You've got to be delicate with these title tags, but very important that you're including relevant keywords. Same thing with your meta keywords on your page and also your meta description. And so what's a meta description? If you Google anything in the SERP results, meaning the results of Google, you'll see a little parrot, right? A little 3 or 4 sentences. That's the description that appears on Google before you get to the website. Well, you should certainly be spending time in optimizing those meta descriptions, and separate even from just optimizing them from a search perspective. You just have to make them engaging enough where someone feels like you're differentiated enough where they want to click on you, and engaging enough. So not enough time is typically spent on crafting meta descriptions. A lot of time is spent on crafting copy for a website, but what about the copy that's leading someone to your website? And lastly, on this page, I breezed over it, but if you look at title, you know what I mean by that is you have to make sure that, keywords. You have to make sure that your keywords are also appearing in your headers of each of the pages, in your subheaders, and also in the body of your paragraphs of those pages. Now, again, you have to write it not for a robot. You still want to write it so that it sounds and flows very smoothly for someone to be engaged. So there's, again, that balance. But you want to make sure you're not just putting the keyword into your title tags above your browser. You've got to make sure it carries through. Okay, so that's called on-page optimization. A lot of companies are not aware really of what that entails. Okay, so here's the tool that I mentioned on how to really evaluate your site, each page of your site, to see if you're falling down or to see if you're doing a great job. So here's tool nugget number 2, which is Yoast. And Yoast is a great free WordPress plugin, and I'm going to assume that a majority of attendees today to the webinar are on WordPress. And that's a great plugin to be able to optimize basic on-page SEO. It evaluates your pages, you know, with their keywords, their copy imagery, inbound, outbound links, metadata, and page by page. I've given you a screenshot of, you know, red meaning you've fallen down, and green meaning you've done a great job on the page for, you know, for certain aspects of SEO. So you should certainly be plugging in Yoast to your site, taking a look at every single page on your site, and then from there, there's actionable insights that you can be taking with you to make sure that everything is cleaned up. Okay? In addition to that, a lot of companies forget that the images on their website, right, they're not searchable unless there's really alt text added to those images, behind those images, so that when Google Spider crawls your website, you know, if you have I'll use TribalVision as an example. If I have an image, I'd want to make sure that image is labeled as outsourced marketing or marketing firm, where we're labeling that. And so you should be going to each of the images on your website, and you can make sure it's called alternate text, right? Alt text. You want to make sure that you're filling that in. Okay, so another hopefully practical tip. In addition, again, you want to make sure even within your website you have internal links linking to other pages within your website, and also external links, right, to whether it be studies that you're referencing to, or a case study or a white paper from a company that you're referencing. You want to make sure you're building as many links on your website as possible, even interconnecting the pages of your website. Here's another practical tip. Neil Patel, he's a thought leader in marketing that's online. He's fantastic. He has a tool. If you go to neilpatel.com, you'll see that there's a great tool that really also grades your website and grades each page of your website. I want to mention one nugget on this page. If you notice next to the number 66, page level speed score, right? And then there's the load time, page size, etc. That's really important. You've got to make sure that your site at this point is loading as quickly as possible. Because again, Google wants to make sure that their users of Google that are now visiting your site have the best experience possible. So if they use Google and Google's saying that this is a relevant company that should be trusted because Google's ranked them highly, they're not going to be recommending sites that are loading slowly. Okay, so you've got to make sure, even just from a search engine optimization perspective, that your load times are as fast as possible, right? It should be not 1.63 seconds, it should be a lot faster than that. So if you're a manufacturer, for example, and you have a lot of heavy images on your site of your product, you've got to make sure you're on a hosting package that is powerful enough where those images cannot, they can load quickly and not hold up the experience. Okay, so don't just think of SEO as just as on-page content. A lot of it is, but it's the overall experience to a user, and some of that has to do with just how quickly that your website is loading. Okay, so a practical nugget, a lot of companies we work with, at first they're on something as basic as GoDaddy.com. There are other providers out there now, one being Media Temple that I would recommend using. We've used others that just haven't compared to the price of Media Temple, and the loading speed has been very good. And their customer service has been very good. So I would recommend looking into Media Temple if you're now a little bit worried about what your site is loading at. Also, again, common sense, but oftentimes overlooked. You've got to make sure that you're present on business directories and also on even just Google My Business. So there's a lot of companies we work with where they have even set up their Google My Business page. Which is very important, and you're going to be rewarded for that from an SEO perspective since it's Google. Here's a nugget for you. For this year, you should set a goal for your company, whether you're B2B or B2C, doesn't matter, where you should be setting up a process where you're requesting reviews from satisfied customers, right? So it could be as simple as putting an email together, putting a link in the email to this Google page where they can very easily click on the link and just be able to write a review on the spot, so there's no heavy lifting on their end. Okay, because Google is now really weighting positive reviews, especially from high quality reviewers who are credible, very highly in their search rankings. Okay, because again, back in the day, there were techniques where I had mentioned keyword stuffing and a lot of other black hat techniques where it wasn't like hard work to actually build your credibility. It's just sort of these black hat techniques. Nowadays, it really is. You've got to do it the old-fashioned way. You've got to write good content, and you've got to get a buzz within your client base of positive reviews. Okay, so if nothing else, you really should be thinking about how can I start building up my reviews on Google. And even separate from search engine optimization, just know that if you're a company that is being pitted against your competitor, and your competitor is asleep at the wheel with this, and they might have 1 or 2 5-star reviews, but you have 17 5-star reviews. I mean, who is that potential customer going to be choosing if they have nothing else at their disposal? They're definitely going to be clicking on you before your competitor. Most companies are not leveraging this. I'll just use TribalVision as the example. 1 5-star review a few years ago when we first started doing this, it ended up jumping us 3 positions organically in search in a very competitive space, which was huge for us. And that's only gone up. Okay, so that's SEO. Hopefully there's some practical, again, takeaways that you can be using, right? I don't want to be pie in the sky and just talking theory and lingo that ultimately you're going to say, this is great, but what can I do tomorrow practically to really strengthen my website? Okay, so now we're going to get on, again, this is still top of funnel right now, but now we're going to get on to what's called account-based marketing. It's really the rage right now. Again, if I polled the attendees here, I would probably say maybe half know about account-based marketing and maybe half don't. So the term really is ABM. And what account-based marketing is really 5 steps to it. And I'll just read this. I think it's easier. It's a strategy in which sales and marketing teams work together to target best fit accounts and turn them into customers. There's a 5-step approach that allows sales teams to identify accounts with the highest revenue potential for your business and enables your marketing team to develop a tailored campaign to contacts at these accounts. So what this means is, and again, it sounds like common sense, but there's now a multi-channel approach to this, where the good old days of batching and blasting one message to 10,000 contacts in your database through Constant Contact or MailChimp, while that's still out there, what's happening now is it's much more personalized and much more one-on-one with the approach. So, for example, TribalVision right now is working with dozens at this point, dozens of companies that are trying to implement this ABM, where we're working with their sales team to identify, let's just say, and build out a hit list of 250 companies. And let's just assume we're B2B for a second. I think most of attendees today are business to business, where we're building out, let's just say, a hit list of 250 companies that they would love to be selling to someday. And from there, instead of just cold calling, which was the good old days, there are now tools at our disposal and technology at our disposal where we can identify the right individuals and influencers at those companies and start building a really customized personal list of, within those 250 companies, maybe there's 2 or 3 contacts per companies that we've identified. So we now have, let's say, a 500 to 700 name list that we now are able to then capture emails for through tools and then start deploying, not just email campaigns, but targeted social media campaigns, all in the hopes of building an awareness and mostly a thought leadership awareness within those targeted accounts. Okay, so in the response rates that we've seen even for our own clients certainly make this worthwhile. So again, it's back to, instead of the good old days of just sort of lazy marketing of building your database and blasting a message, it's become much more difficult because a lot of those same companies are just deleting Constant Contact email templates, and they're looking for something that's treating them individually versus as one of many. Okay, so you can think of this 5-step approach as identify accounts, profile accounts, create the content, launch the campaigns, and then measure and analyze the campaigns. So in terms of identifying accounts, again, I won't go into this too much, it's common sense, but you can be identifying accounts by vertical, right? You could say, okay, if I'll use me as the example, I'm a marketing firm, okay, well, there's a nonprofit vertical, there's a manufacturer vertical, there's a professional services vertical, etc. And then from there, what size company do you want to be targeting? So again, it's all a matter for you personally. Who do you want to be targeting out there that might not know enough about you where you really want to start building an awareness with those accounts? So step 1 is identify. Step 2, I already mentioned a little bit ago, is profiling each of those accounts, right? Who are we going after in those accounts, right? Is it business owners? Is it the C-suite? Is it influencers at lower levels that we think could then influence that decision maker who's probably going to delete us if we're sending it directly to them? So you've got to really think about who are the individuals within those companies that you want to outreach to, that you want to gather their email and LinkedIn addresses. Okay. From there, you've got to create content, right? Back to top, middle, and bottom funnel that we've talked about that we're using as our own framework for this presentation. There's different types of content, of course, for someone that you've never met before that you have to introduce yourself to versus someone who's raised their hand who shows some type of interest. They're starting to date you a little bit. There's a different type of content that you should be developing for that middle of funnel hand raise. And then again, you've got to be thinking about what content do you want for this ABM campaign for when someone does more than just raise their hand. They're now looking for validation before they actually make the buy, right, where you can actually sell them. Okay, and step 4 then, once the content is created, so right, you've identified the companies, you've identified the individuals in the companies, now you have to then be launching those campaigns. And again, this is just very basic, but top of funnel again is acquisition. You might be saying, okay, I'm going to be setting a Google AdWords, LinkedIn, and direct mail multi-prong approach to these 250 individuals. For those that do raise their hand, we're then going to have drip email marketing take place to them, retargeting on Facebook, have a webinar like today, for example, and then bottom of funnel campaigns could be, again, a personalized assessment, and then again, back and forth sales communication with your company. So this is just high level here, back of envelope, but my point is you've got to then be thinking about what marketing channels do I want to be using to be targeting this 250 company subset. And lastly, reporting, of course, right? Because you've got to get this down to a science where you know what your open rates are to that email campaign, or what your click-through rates are to that social media sponsored post that you're putting in front of that individual. You need to start setting benchmarks for yourself, so you have a very good idea of whether or not it's working or not. What we're finding with our own clients right now, if we just use email as the example, where we are sending drip email campaigns to these targeted individuals, we're averaging between a 3 and 5% response rate of individuals who have responded, who have raised their hand that said, I do want to take a 15-minute conversation with someone to learn more. Again, always trying to be practical here. There's some practical tools that you can be taking away from this presentation if you don't know of them already. My guess is you might not know more than maybe 1 or 2 of these. My hope is you don't, so I can really add value with this slide. So there's a tool out there called LeadIQ, and if we package LeadIQ and Hunter.io together, those are 2 tools that we're leveraging internally at TribalVision that are open for anyone to use, where it allows you to find email addresses, right? So instead of just going the old-fashioned way and just buying a list from Dun & Bradstreet or Hoover's, and it's expensive and it's not really targeted, you can go on a company's profile page, for example, LinkedIn profile page, find the individual that you're looking for that works at the company on their LinkedIn profile, right-click using LeadIQ, and then you'll be able to find, not 100% of the time, but about 75% of the time, it'll be able to capture their email address. Hunter.io, it's the same concept. You're just not going through LinkedIn. You're literally just right-clicking on the website, the company website, and that will then provide you with all of the email addresses that it's found for that company. So even if you can't find that individual's email for whatever reason, by right-clicking using Hunter.io, if you know, for example, that the extensions that you have found are, first initial of the first name and then last name at, companyname.com, then you're going to know the individual's first and last name. You'll be able to figure out most of the time what their email address is. So these 2 tools are really powerful for stages 1 and 2, right, in terms of identifying and building out your lists. Okay. The next 2 tools that we use, and there are many out there, so I'm just giving these as examples. One is what's called Active Campaign, and we're going to get into that in a little bit later in the presentation, and another being PersistIQ. I'll start with PersistIQ. PersistIQ, again, it's an HTML-only email platform. So think of like MailChimp or Constant Contact, but think of it without the graphic template to it whatsoever. That makes it look like you're sending it to thousands. So with PersistIQ, it really does have the feel that it's coming directly from you or your CEO or whoever you want this outreach to come from. But it can be done on a mass scale, right? You can be deploying 1,000, 2,000 of these emails at a time, and it still looks completely personalized. You can automate PersistIQ, so you can already set rules where you can have 4 or 5 emails go out over a 2-week period with these campaigns. It's a very powerful tool if you're looking to come across as personalized as possible for your outreach. And it's not expensive. We're talking maybe $100 a month. We're not talking, $1,000 a month for this type of tool. Active Campaign, which again I said we're going to get into a little bit later, that's also interesting because in addition to doing that, it also has a CRM, customer relationship management platform on the back end, so that those campaigns where someone does raise their hand, that can flow automatically into their CRM for your sales force to be reaching out to. So it really limits any type of manual input. And again, we're using that at TribalVision even for ourselves at this point. And we've studied many automation platforms for this type of ABM purpose. And again, that pricing, which I'll go into second, we're talking like $200 a license a month on average. It's not going to break the bank. And lastly, Google Analytics, of course, right? Most of you have probably heard of Google Analytics. You've got to make sure you have code on every page of your website so you really can see when someone does hit your site to explore, you can see where they're coming from what campaigns, etc. Okay, so hopefully those are some really practical tools that you can be using if you did decide to start going forward with ABM. I wanted to throw this slide in. This is, we call this, or I shouldn't say we, Aaron Ross, he was the former VP of sales for Salesforce.com. He wrote a book called Predictable Revenue that has become the rage over the last couple of years. What Cold Calling 2.0 is, it's just a slice of account-based marketing, if you want to think of it that way, right? Because for ABM, I had mentioned, it's a multi-channel approach, right? Using social media, using drip campaigns. There's a lot of channels that can be used for account-based marketing. For Cold Calling 2.0, what Aaron Ross did for Salesforce.com years ago was he really just stuck to drip email marketing campaigns, right? So he said, okay, I want to build my list. And from building that list, I now want to start deploying 6 or 7 drip emails with unique content to each of those emails with, assets in each of that piece of content, right? So there can be a link to a video that you've done in email number 1. There can be a link to, your company story. There can be a link to a case study or a white paper. The more assets that you can sprinkle into this Cold Call 2.0 campaign, the better. And the reason he's called it Cold Calling 2.0 is simple. Instead of doing the old, just buy a list and now start calling that list, which is really doesn't work anymore. It's too many gatekeepers. Now you're leveraging, number one, really personal lists, but you're also then outreaching through email to individuals at companies. So it's really taking the place at this point of telemarketing. And again, you've got to make sure that you're CAN spam compliant. That's very important. And you've got to make sure that, meaning your subject line can't be salesy. You have to have a physical location. There has to be an opt-out, et cetera. But a lot of B2B companies that are in niche markets, oftentimes that are just looking for that needle in the haystack, this can work very well for them. So that's account-based marketing. Hopefully there's some nuggets there that you enjoyed. We're still top of funnel, as you know, so this is the last tactic that I'm going to talk to. It's LinkedIn marketing, and again, I know everyone knows LinkedIn. I'm not going to tell you just, work on your profiles. Everyone knows that, of course. This is the lowest hanging fruit, just so I'll breeze through this, but you've got to make sure that you're building up your free page, right, on LinkedIn. A lot of times companies say, oh yeah, I have a LinkedIn page. But when we really start digging in, we really realize that it's pretty weak, right? There aren't any updates that have happened over the last months with any type of posting that they're doing. There's no job updates whatsoever. The individuals, their profiles are not fully built out. Once you're starting to click on, the C-suite executives or the sales team, you've got to make sure that you're really buttoned up with the look and feel of your company page and of the key individuals that someone finds off of that page. It can even be as simple as, do the profile pictures of your team, are they consistent, or are they all over the place? And nowadays, someone is judging you as much on your LinkedIn company profile page as they are as your homepage of your website, because they're getting under the hood at this point and really wanting to understand the guts of your organization and who drives it. So you've got to make sure you're buttoned up with your LinkedIn page. In addition, again, if we're talking lead generation, it's my opinion, it's a bit of a no-brainer for most companies. I mean, there are some that are B2C that might not need LinkedIn as much, but for B2B, it's somewhat of a no-brainer to be signing up for whether it's a premium business account or there's what's called Sales Navigator Pro, and then for power users, it's called Recruiter Lite, where it's a combination for HR and recruiting, but also for lead generation. But bottom line is, what premium allows you to do is it allows you to send a certain number of in-mails, which is the same thing as an email, a certain number of in-mails on a monthly basis to, again, right, to individuals that aren't in your network, aren't in your circle. Okay. In addition to that, sending out monthly in-mails, what you should be looking at is really targeting. Remember, if we're going to build that list of 250 or let's say 2,500, LinkedIn has these search tools and filters out there where it's very easy for you to be, putting in, again, I'll use TribalVision as the example. I put in, I want every C-suite executive, in the New England market that's between, 51 employees or 50 employees and 150 employees, with these SIC codes. I'm able to put that in and from there build out a targeted list. Okay, and so the question is, okay, well, what are you going to do with that targeted list? well, number one, we've already talked about ABM, so you can use that. But in addition to that, you can start, I'm going to skip this for a second, you can now start putting together content to be getting in front of those individuals you want to get into that you've just filtered, right? So if you have a hit list now of 2,500 or 25,000 individuals that you know that potentially could be a buyer of your product or service in the future, you could then be targeting them with pieces of content, right? So here's an example of a slide I put together. It's for Valentine's Day, right? So what good dating and marketing have in common? I'm not just posting this on my LinkedIn company page and say, okay, I did what I could with LinkedIn. No, I'm paying for a sponsored post to now get in front of, those 25,000 names that I'm now targeting, where this piece of content for free is going to be in front of them on their feed. The reason I say it's free is because it's only if they click on that piece of content will you have to pay for that. So it's a very easy way for you to start building awareness within your target audiences, and if nothing else, start building awareness. Hopefully the best case scenario is they do click on that graphic. It then leads them to your white paper, for example, and a landing page and a form for them to then be filling out information. Right, and all of a sudden you've captured their email address, if nothing else. So if nothing else, it's building up that email list of yours that you can be leveraging in the future. So we've talked about your LinkedIn company page, no brainer, and your individual profiles. We've talked about InMail and the importance of a premium account. And we're now also talking about, again, these sponsored posts that you can be targeting individuals that you want to be selling into. Okay, so that's a little bit about LinkedIn. That's the block and tackling. If you're not doing that, my 2 cents is it's the lowest hanging fruit, top of funnel that you should be focusing in on. Notice I didn't talk about paid search, right? There's, many, I didn't talk about display advertising. I didn't talk about, a lot of other techniques. But for me, again, we have an hour. I don't want to spend too much of your time today. I thought those were some, 3 of your sort of 3 horsemen when it comes to top of funnel tactics. Now we get to nurture, right? And again, this is going to go a little faster here. We have about 20 minutes. So just know that once someone has raised their hand and they've come into your top of funnel, a lot of organizations then just say, okay, we've got them. And they don't think about, though, from a marketing perspective, what they can be doing to stay in front of them, right? Because while your sales team might be doing a good job, marketing should also play a role to make sure that you still are looking credible and you're doing everything you can to push them from showing an interest and still comparing you against your competition to finally actually closing a deal with them. Okay, so we're going to talk about remarketing with this mid-funnel and also drip email marketing campaigns. So again, I'm going to guess 50%, 60% know what remarketing is. For the 40% who don't, just know that remarketing, or another word for it is retargeting, is what happens when someone comes to your website and then leave your website. And then once they've left your website, all of a sudden they start realizing, my God, your company is showing up on CNN.com when they're reading an article, or on the BostonGlobe.com, or wherever you might be on the internet. There's a very good chance, using Google's network for remarketing, you're going to be able to show up. Okay, so I'm just using a visual here with Cole Haan, where you're searching for that shoe at Cole Haan's website, and all of a sudden now you're on Facebook and you're finding and enjoy 40% off clearance sale on those shoes. Okay, so just be aware that it's really the lowest hanging fruit right now in terms of an ROI, digital marketing wise, that we know of, and that we're not just saying that, it's stats are showing that, where it's a no-brainer. If someone's raised their hand, you want to make sure that you're staying in front of them. Now, you could argue, yeah, but I don't want to be creepy or big brother or annoy people where I'm following them everywhere. I hate that when it happens to me. I don't disagree. Just know that you're enabled to pulse the frequency of this retargeting. It doesn't have to be daily. It doesn't have to be all the time. It can be pulsed in a way where you're staying in front with relevant pieces of content, but not to the point where someone's annoyed. So it's your own discretion in terms of how much frequency you want. I would say more sophisticated companies are not just coming and remarketing with just one piece of content, like one graphic or one white paper or one video testimonial. They're swapping those out, right? Every month or so, if not sooner, they're swapping out the pieces of content so it always stays fresh. Okay? So you just want to make sure, though, that marketing should be in your nurture portfolio. So here's just an example using me as the example, make it simple. Here are two pieces of content that you can see on the screen, right? One is a picture of me where they can be clicking on a testimonial, and then the other again is a white paper talking to the benefits of an outsourced marketing department, right? And now since then, we've also created 4 or 5 other pieces of content that we're rotating through. You might be asking, okay, well, how do you pay for this? Same thing as paid search, in a sense, in terms of Google display. You're only paying for a click. So you could be staying in front of someone who was on your website, and you're only paying if they're clicking on that graphic. And that click, by the way, typically is a fifth of the cost, sometimes even more, like a tenth of the cost of a typical click if you're doing a Google paid search campaign. So it's inexpensive, and it's a good way for you to be trying to nurture someone down your path, right? Because someone might have gotten to know you just a little bit on your website, but what about now a week later? Oh, they saw a client video testimonial. 2 weeks later, oh, they just saw a white paper that's interesting to them. A month later, right, they saw a case study that is them, that sounds like them. Yeah, and you're staying top of mind with them and relevant, whereas probably a lot of your competition isn't doing that. Okay. Also know that don't just view this in terms of just website visitors to remarket to. You can also remarket to your email database. You can build lookalike lists nowadays through LinkedIn and through Facebook, where it's like it looks like your list. It's the same demographic and SIC code, for example, as the customer list that you have. You now can be remarketing to those as well, along with if you do have a paid search campaign going through Google. If they go and click on your ad and go to your landing page or your of your paid search campaign, you can be following them as well. So I just want to be clear, it's more sophisticated now than just, okay, if you go on a company's website, they'll follow you. It's also any campaign that you have, we can setting retargeting pixels to. Okay? And lastly, on retargeting, just know that it's not just following them on the Google Display Network, like I had mentioned earlier on the Boston Globe or CNN or wherever you are online, right? You should be also making sure that you're on YouTube with a video, right? As you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen, the center of the screen, here that's LinkedIn. So we can be remarketing through LinkedIn, and we can also be remarketing through Facebook, along with Google Display Network. So again, the more that we peel back this orange, the more you realize, it's getting a little bit more sophisticated. I still think a lot of it's great common sense in marketing, but there's just more channels and more ways to stay in front of somebody. So just know that the goal would be, are you present on all of those channels once someone leaves your site? Okay, so that's nurture. One other piece of nurture I just wanted to mention was drip email campaigns. And if you remember, I mentioned drip before when we talked about account-based marketing, but that was drip to someone that doesn't know you yet, right? These drip email campaigns are someone who has filled out a form on your website, right, where you have gotten their permission, right, to capture their email address because you've provided something of value. And you want to make sure, right, sophisticated companies are making sure then that there are drip email campaigns that are nurturing that top of funnel lead through to a close. And again, I won't go into it too much, but know that that's where marketing automation comes in, and we're going to get to that in a moment, where you really can be thinking through, once someone comes on your site and fills out a lead form, well, there should be a thank you email that goes to them, right? And then from there, there should be a welcome email potentially. And then what about if they buy from you? What are you doing from there after they've actually made a purchase? You should be making sure that there are timed drip, right, emails that are going out to them. It could be a birthday email. It could be an anniversary email to when they bought something from you. It could be they were just browsing your site and you saw that they clicked on a link, and you can then be serving up that type of content of the link that they enjoyed on your site. You could be dripping that type of relevant content to them through a content calendar you've set up, over months, right? And if you notice, most of what I'm saying is not annoying sales, right? It's education, it's thought leadership, it's ways to stay in front of someone where you're adding value. You're not hitting them over the head where they're going to get annoyed and it's going to dilute your brand. Okay, so again, if you're thinking nurture, think remarketing, and think of making sure that you're setting up some very basic at first drip email marketing campaigns. This is the content calendar I referenced just a second ago, right? Again, if you're really on your marketing game and if you have the bandwidth, you should really be developing a content calendar, right? In terms of when those emails are deployed, what's going to be the content of that email, etc. Okay, so this is, it's just a bit of an eye candy slide, but my point is, with this eye candy is, you really do want to hold yourselves to building out a calendar where you know what all of those drips are over the 6-month period, when they are going to be timed, right, and what that content is going to consist of, and if that content flows well or not so well to the next piece of content. Okay, so again, it's all about putting a structure in place to be interacting with that lead. And lastly, right, if we're talking email drip, you've got to make sure that you're tracking again, right? Because if you're not tracking and seeing really who's opening, who's clicking, what's the point of this? The goal is a sale. So a practical nugget here is someone's opening your email that you just sent out. Well, what if they have then passed it around your office and you now notice that 7 others in their office have clicked on that white paper? That might be something that you want to send to your sales team to say, look, we have someone who's very engaged, who it might be a good idea for us to outreach to see if they need any help or if they want to talk to anybody. Okay. And then lastly, again, I want to talk about bottom of funnel, right? We've talked about, with these drip campaigns, marketing automation. This is the technology component for this year that you really need to be thinking about, where companies that aren't thinking technology and infrastructure are going to really, they already are being lapped, but you're going to really be behind if you don't start thinking about investing in some type of marketing automation technology. Okay, so very quickly, what is marketing automation, right? It really allows you to streamline, automate, and measure marketing tasks and workflows. So instead of manual, okay, we've got to get an email out and have a lot of man or woman power to put that together, and then, okay, next month we now have to do another one. It's rules-based, where we can really be thinking through up front, how many emails do we want to be deploying, over the course of, let's say, 6 months. And this automation technology allows you to set all of that up in advance, put the rules in place that's needed so that you can be on a scalable fashion, on a scalable platform. You can now start interacting on more of a one-on-one relationship with your database. Okay, so that's where you've probably heard of the name HubSpot. They're publicly traded in Cambridge. They're a marketing machine in a lot of ways. They're publicly traded. They are all about marketing automation and their technology product for someone like yourself to purchase. Doesn't mean, by the way, that we're recommending HubSpot. There's actually dozens and dozens of automation providers we'll go into in a minute, and you have to really figure out what's best for you. Lastly, I would just say this slide is really all about knowing that you can also integrate your automation with CRM, right, a customer relationship management platform, where ultimately you can be even lead scoring those leads that are coming in, right? You're going to be able to score those leads to say, is this worth my salesperson's time to be reaching out to, or should this continue to be nurtured until we feel like there's a score that's, you set the score, right, from 1 to 10. Let's just say it's above a 7, that you want to then say, okay, a 7 is now passed to the CRM and passed to our sales team, right? But there is a lead scoring component to automation, which can, again, save a lot of time and a lot of wasted effort that I think you should be really looking into. Here's just a few of the dozens of automation platforms to choose from. I had mentioned ActiveCampaign earlier. There's also MailChimp. You might say, well, wait a minute, didn't you bust on MailChimp that it's just a template and batch and blast email platform? Well, MailChimp is trying to get into the automation game, where they now have a watered down automation module, which might just be fine for someone just dipping their toe in the water of automation. And then there's Marketo. Marketo is the beast, right? Marketo can cost you thousands and thousands of dollars a month to use their platform. You typically are going to have, my opinion, for it to be worthwhile for you, 50,000 name database for you to really be able to see the value of all the bells and whistles that their automation provides. Oftentimes we recommend ActiveCampaign to our clients, and I think I mentioned I use that here even at TribalVision. It's user-friendly, right? It's really everything that a small to mid-sized business needs to put a marketing automation platform in place And the benefit of this also, just know, is that in addition to developing workflows, meaning right, like remember I said the different paths of emails that you can be sending out to someone based on what they click on your website, it also is cost effective, right? So it's about, here's a screenshot of some of their pricing, but we're really talking about, on average about $200. If you want to be a bit of a power user, $100 to $200 a month per license. It also provides you with a CRM, and this is really why we like it, is instead of marrying an automation platform with the CRM, just know that they now also have a CRM built in so that you don't need to be buying both individually. It comes packaged together. And that's where the space is going, right? Salesforce now has Pardot. That's sort of the Cadillac that I wouldn't recommend many on this webinar probably to be purchasing, unless, again, you have a really powerful database. You have HubSpot, of course, that's integrating with a lot of CRMs. But then you have the Active Campaigns, the Infusionsofts of the world, where it really is a very economical packaged platform, two-part platform that works very well. Last slide, really, I believe, before we get to a quote that I always enjoy, is if you don't want to do that type of package automation platform, a nice starter approach you can even use for your CRM is what's called Streak. It's just part of Google's portfolio. It's free as long as you're not a power user, and this is just an example of their CRM. I actually use it for my own sales pipeline, where you can see, if you squint a little bit, you can see, right, it says, it says lead, it says connected, first appointment, right? So you can follow those leads down a path to close. So this is if you just want to crawl before you walk. This is a nice crawl CRM before you start to walk. Walk could be, again, there's many, of course, as I mentioned, but walk could be probably 10 others that you can look at as well, in addition to the ones that I mentioned. Okay, so just know, if we're talking nurture, you've got to be thinking all about marketing automation at this point. And the good thing is, with technology, you don't have to be spending an arm and a leg, right? I mean, there's a lot of companies that spend money on Pardot and Salesforce, which is fine. Just know you're buying a Cadillac, and there's a lot of companies that bring us in that realize they didn't need all those bells and whistles to start. They just really needed something that was, a starter package to just get them going, that's not going to intimidate their sales force or their marketing team. Okay, last slide I always like to end with. Peter Drucker, godfather really of modern day marketing. He has this great quote that I always like to end my presentations with, which is, because the purpose of business is to create a customer, the business enterprise has two and only two basic functions: marketing and innovation. Marketing and innovation produce results, all the rest are costs. Marketing is the distinguishing, unique function of the business. So I'm passionate about this, not just because it's the line of work that I'm in, but I really do feel like as long as companies can start changing mindset to realize that marketing is not a cost engine or an expense, it really is the driver for their growth. And hopefully a lot of what I've talked about today is embraced and actually can be pushed forward with your own internal teams versus, the typical response of, well, unless it can prove an ROI within the first 2 months, I'm too smart to even think about doing that. So hopefully that mindset can change just a little bit. With that said, I am going to open it up to any type of questions that everyone has. It's about 2:55, so we have a good 5 or 10 minutes if there are any questions. So you can just go ahead and just start typing into the chat box there if you do have any questions. I hope you found this useful. I tried to do it in such a way where, again, we're thinking about that top, mid, bottom funnel framework. And if nothing else, hopefully you came away with 4 or 5 or hopefully more nuggets that you can be implementing right away from your business, for your business. With that said, if there are any chat questions, feel free. I've got Doreen here saying, thank you, very useful. Thank you, Doreen. Looks like there's some people typing now. Will writes, any thoughts on managing salespeople's LinkedIn pages internally for the top of the funnel? Very interesting question. Just know that there are some companies who are, I can go on about this probably for 20 minutes, so I won't bore people, but I would say that there are some companies that are very protective of this where they don't want to do that at all because they don't feel like it's their right, because salespeople are really owners of their own LinkedIn profiles and they don't want to be infringing on them. Others feel like it's a requirement for their businesses where they really should be making sure that they are really taking an active role in making sure their salespeople's LinkedIn profile pages are as buttoned up and as up to date as possible. For me, yeah, I would take the latter, right? I would do everything I can on trying to manage them as long as they're comfortable with it. I would argue that there really should be, Will, at first, a training for LinkedIn for your sales team, because, again, at least those companies that I've worked with, those that have older sales teams, oftentimes there's resistance to LinkedIn still, and they really don't know how to best leverage LinkedIn, even their own profiles. So I would do a pretty robust training on how, best practices for a sales team to be leveraging LinkedIn with, top 10 practical nuggets for that team for them to be implementing. And then it's up to you as an organization to say how much you really want to be enforcing that, right? There are some companies that I work with where they enforce, like, if you have 300 contacts and you're the VP of sales, you need to get to 500 contacts within the next year. That is a goal that needs to be achieved. Others are much more laid back about it. So just know that it's really, again, at that point, it's sort of a balancing act with what's the company's right with that versus an individual sort of securing their own personal profile. So hopefully that was helpful, Will. Sure thing. Thanks. Donna, thank you. Any suggestions for comment sites when your business cannot have their customers identified online? So Donna, I'm assuming you mean that that you would love to have third-party verification of all the great work you're doing, but ultimately it's difficult to do because they really need to stay confidential. Am I correct about that, Donna? Yes, correct. So just know that, yeah, those are tricky situations, and we work with a lot of B2B companies, because I believe you're B2B, that, they're dealing with Harley Davidson, right? They're dealing with major brands like Costco, where they're just never going to get that person from Costco or Harley Davidson ever allowing themselves to have any type of testimonial or even written statement. So, there's no marketing magic that I can produce for you there, other than you've got to just try and find those companies that, you'll be getting permission to make sure that takes place. But it's very tough to get around a company's legal department when it comes to trying to leverage them for third-party reviews or verification, unfortunately. I wish I had a better answer, but we've been at this for a bit. Very difficult. But that being said, there are mid-market companies where, as long as you do a bang-up job for them, it shouldn't be that difficult actually for them to say yes. The key is going to be, to what I said earlier, make it really easy for them, right? Get a link, send it to them, make it as simple for them as possible to get to where they need to go to be providing you with that review. In a perfect world, I'll say this, everyone should be thinking about customer video testimonials, right? Again, I eat my own cooking. If you look at TribalVision site, I think there's 17 clients on camera talking about us and the work that we've done. So it's doable. It's just a matter of, I brought the videographer to them, to their office. I didn't want to be intrusive. I said, all I need is 20 minutes of your time. I said up front, if I do a bang up job, that's my carrot. Are you comfortable with that? So there's all little nuanced ways to make sure that up front you're setting that expectation. But yeah, it's not hard and fast, unfortunately. Maria asked, will there be a copy of this presentation after the webinar is over? Yes, there will be. You can just also email me directly, and I can certainly be providing that to you. So yeah, no worries whatsoever. Anyone who raises their hand will get a copy of this presentation. Yep, no worries at all, Maria. Any other questions? That's interesting. No, we don't use Zapier at this point, Will, but just know that we have clients that do. And it's very interesting. Are you using it right now, Will? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've heard good things. What's been your experience so far? So just waiting for Will to type that. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free. But it seems like there aren't any other questions at this time. So yeah, here we go. Will just said very easy to integrate many. It is. So no, we don't for TribalVision, but again, we oftentimes are researching a lot of platforms, and that has come up many times for our client teams, and we've heard nothing but good things. Okay, I think that's it, everybody. So Ted Larson, oh, I'm sorry, Ted, how you doing, Ted? Ted has a potential question here. Value of LinkedIn Premium. So can you just expound upon that a bit more, Ted? So LinkedIn Premium, again, it's really about $100 a month. The value that I see, if I get your question correct, really is it enables you now to be outreaching to individuals outside your circle with these targeted in-mail campaigns. And you can do it in such a way, right, where hopefully you research the firms before you reach out to them. But absolutely, in terms of to help with transparency and connectivity, I don't know about transparency as much, but in terms of connectivity, absolutely. We're using that for some of our clients. Okay, we're going to use up those 20 in-mails a month, and we're going to treat it like gold and find those 20 contacts that we'd really love to get a meeting with for our clients, personalize the heck out of that in-mail, and see if they are open to a 10-minute conversation. And oftentimes we find the response rate for an in-mail, and there are stats backing this up, are 5 or 6 times the response rates of an email. And especially if you really personalize this well enough, we found that it's even higher than that. So for that alone, right, especially if you're in a business where one client could equal $100,000 for lifetime value, we feel that the $99 a month is certainly worth it. By the way, it also allows you, right, to see who's actually clicking on your profile so that you can really see with your own sales efforts, you can have a much, I guess it is transparency, right? Much more transparent way of seeing the activity around your new business activity. So that alone also, if I see that there's someone that I was trying to sell from 6 months ago that now is on my LinkedIn account snooping around again, it might be time for a quick phone call or email just to see if they have time for a coffee. So let's see. Thank you for everything. Any more of these types of events coming up in the future for TribalVision? And Ted said, perfect, thanks for your insight. My pleasure, Ted. Yeah, we're going to be holding a quarterly webinar for everybody. So just know that the next one is not for a few months, but we want to make sure we really have timely presentations. I'm thinking the next presentation or webinar that I'm going to be doing is all about just practical tools that a company can be using, right, that are either free or less than a couple $100 a month. I know I talked about maybe 6 or 7 today, but there are countless number of tools that are exploding out there right now that I think could really add value for organizations. So it's a good chance that's going to be our next topic. And yeah, thanks for the interest. Okay, I think that's it, everybody. So thank you for your time. I hope you got something out of it. And for those interested, we'll certainly be sending the